covering the stories that impact your life, your town, your state, and your future. This is the Means Report with your host, Brad Means.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the Means Report. We certainly appreciate you spending part of your day with us, where today we are honored to have with us Richmond County Sheriff Richard Roundtree, and we're going to cover a wide variety of topics for you today about law enforcement in general, what Sheriff Roundtree and his team face on a daily basis, what it's like to be the sheriff of Augusta, Georgia, Richmond County. Homelessness, we've covered that in the news lately. Sheriff Roundtree reaching out to local business owners to help address the issue of homelessness in Augusta. We'll get an update on that. And certainly how the community can help. You know, ever since the sheriff took office, he's been very big on community policing, the community's input and involvement, and we can keep our town a lot safer if you step up and do your part. And then, as always, we'll wrap up this edition of the Means Report with ways that you can stay in touch and help us get more great guests like Richmond County Sheriff Richard Roundtree. Sheriff, thanks for coming back to the Means Report. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure, Bob.
Well, pleasure for me as well. And I can't believe it's been a decade plus since you took office. Back in 2012, you were elected. I remember us talking during that campaign. So what's it been like over the past 10 plus years? Has your job gotten easier as the years go by, more challenging? How is it?
You know, I wish I could say it's gotten easier.
Yeah.
But we've learned. I mean, you know, it's a learning process. You know, this is my 30th year in law enforcement. So I've been blessed to have a very healthy career right here in the Augusta area. So I'm extremely proud of that, to be able to grow up in this community and at some point to be able to lead the largest full-service sheriff office in the state of Georgia for the last 11 years. So that's truly been a blessing. So I'm never going to complain about the job. That's not going to happen. But yeah, we have our challenging moments, but it's kind of like parenthood. Sometimes, you know, your kids are the greatest things in the world and you love it. And sometimes you're like, oh my God, why did I become a parent? So it's the same thing, you know, with the sheriff. But the thing about it that I tell everybody, no matter what happens at the end of the day, the most rewarding part is we're able to help a lot of people. Me and my staff are able to help a lot of people in this community, and that's what makes everything worth it. So gun violence has been challenging for us, but that's throughout the nation. But it's, you know, that's the thing that we struggle with. A lot of other things we made huge improvements in that we see, but unfortunately gun violence kind of overshadows that from time to time. And we wish the public would just see all the other great things that my deputies do too, and know that this is a challenging line of work. So it's still a work in progress, but again, you know, I'm never going to complain about the job and being in my hometown and trying to make it better, because we do have the opportunity to do that.
I tell you what, the comparison that you just made to parenthood, I feel that, especially as we record this broadcast. I mean, right before we started recording, I was dealing with some stuff as we do. We love them, but wow, that's a challenge sometimes with our children. Is Augusta a safe town, Sheriff?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, the thing about it is the perception, is what crime is and the perception of crime. Unfortunately, because of the market that we're in and being as large as we are as the sheriff's office, a lot of times, you know, we get thrown in this one basket trying to compare us to some surrounding counties, to surrounding cities. But what we try to get people to understand is, you know, no one does what we do here in Richmond County, being a consolidated government. You know, being responsible for the entire county. You know, we don't have the luxury of having a metropolitan police department like some of our surrounding counties who can handle some of the incorporated areas. So, you know, our challenge is we got to go from the rural areas all the way to the urban areas, to the business district. And then at the same time, we're managing a 1,000-bed inmate facility, which sometimes people forget. You know, traditionally, sheriff's office in Georgia, all they do is courts and the jail. You know, we do the courts, the jail with 1,000+ inmates, and we answer over 400,000 calls for service every year. So, you know, when people look at it, they want to look at the negative, but statistically, you know, in the last 10 years, crime has went down. Our only struggling category, again, is gun violence. Is the only category that hasn't went down, and unfortunately, what we're seeing is these perpetrators are becoming younger and younger. You know, how many times you look on the media now and you see that the perpetrators are 14, 15-year-old kids. You know, that's what's disheartening. But overall, you know, but a lot of times those individuals, unfortunately, are putting themselves in situations that make their lifestyle more dangerous. But for the average citizen who are going to work every day, making a living for their family, the risks are very low for them for gun violence. And that's what we try to understand, that a lot of this has to do with gang activity and drug activity. And a lot of these individuals put themselves in situations where we tell them that they're either going to be a victim or a perpetrator of gun violence. So for the average citizen, absolutely Augusta is a safe place.
Sheriff, I'm scared to ask this question because I feel like we could spend the rest of our time together talking about it, but just real quickly, have you been able to pinpoint at what stage in a child's life that child goes from being an innocent baby to someone who would consider picking up a gun to solve their problems?
Yeah, like I said, I've been in that 30 years, and for 10 years I worked homicide, and I was starting to see the trend then of younger and younger perpetrator. But then it was between like 18 and 23 were my perpetrator years that you were starting to see the young gun violence. But now, like I said, you're seeing 13, 14, 15-year-olds, and is the lifestyle that they feel they have to live. And the neighborhoods that they grew up into. And a lot of times, I tell them, when this is a community-based problem, this is not a strictly law enforcement problem. And I tell them that parents have to hold their kids accountable. Mm-hmm. I make this analogy all the time. There's no homeless gang members in Augusta. They go to a home every night. They're not living in the streets. They go to some home. So you're talking about a 14, 15-year-old. They're relying on adults. They're relying on parents. So if a 14, 15-year-old, 16-year-old is out at 2:30 in the morning and something happens to them, then we need to look deeper than this is a law enforcement issue. This is a societal and a parenting issue, and that's one of the things that we try to get people to understand, that this has to be a societal issue. We're not going to get anywhere if I just keep locking up your sons and daughters.
Right.
As a society, that's not going to help us as we grow. Now, like I said before, we used to think about teenagers, 17, 18-year-old, and we used to go speak in high schools, but you have to be in elementary schools now. With our CHAMP program, we're in fifth grade, speaking to fifth graders now. We start with our CHAMPS program. So that's why we're introducing them into some of these lifestyle changes. So unfortunately, it's sad that you got to start that young, but that's really where we have to start.
Let me ask you about Ken Mercer, one of your officers who was injured in a shootout in downtown a few days ago, really. How is Deputy Mercer doing?
He's in good spirits. He's home.
Thank goodness.
He got to be a very irritable patient toward the end, which showed his toughness and his tenacity. Especially coming a week out of such a horrific injury, and I was able to watch the body cam footage of the incident, Brad, and we don't, as a community, don't know how fortunate we are to still have Deputy Mercer with us. I was at the hospital that night with his parents, and we sat, and it was very stressful for those 6-7 hours that he was in surgery. And the governor reached out, the community reached out, and thoughts and prayers, and every one of them, I think, it really made a difference, especially to the family in real time, that the community was pulling for him and getting him through that stressful time. So we're unfortunately, that incident resulted in a loss of life, but fortunately, it wasn't one of the heroes of this community.
Thank God he is doing okay, and yeah, this community was lifting him up, and I'm so happy to hear what you just said. I was going to ask you if it surprised you that there was a shootout in broad daylight on a Saturday, but you just talked about gun violence, and we think that the deceased in this case was homeless, and that makes me want to ask you about your effort to address homelessness. I know you're reaching out to businesses to try to get them to help you. How's that going? Can we make a dent in the issue?
I think we can if we look at it as a societal issue. Like I said at our town hall the other night, we in law enforcement are called upon to do so many things that are not traditionally law enforcement issues. Like I said, when I started 30 years ago, we weren't scheduled to be mental health experts. We weren't scheduled to be child counselors. We weren't scheduled to be societal homeless issues. Those were social issues. Those weren't law enforcement issues. So we weren't taught those. So those skills over a period of time are being incorporated into law enforcement activities. And again, sometimes it's unfortunate to the fact that we have to put young deputies through all of that and then do law enforcement strategies. But that's why I say this has to be a community effort. And the thing about bringing these businesses is to make it a partnership, and not only with the businesses, with Superior Court. This is not a brainchild of the Richmond County Sheriff's Office. This is collaboration of a lot of different entities saying, what can we do? And like I said, we're not just trying to incarcerate the individuals. By moving them, if we have to arrest an individual who's a blatant violator of the private property or nuisance ordinance, we can bring them into the Superior Court under their accountability courts, where they have a veterans court, they have a drug court, and a substance abuse court, a drug court, and a veterans court. And we know that most of our homeless fall in one of those three categories. So again, we're not just trying to do it as an incarceration tool, but if these individuals want help, this is a court of accountability that offer these services to these individuals that they can reach out and help. So we're looking at it from a multi-phase approach. First, like I said, by getting business buy-in. The initial night we had 17 to sign up, and we've had about another 15 to sign up since then on the corridor, the stretch that we're using. And we're starting to see some difference in it. Again, it's only been 4 days.
Yeah, just getting started.
But we're optimistic that we're doing something. Everything we do is not going to always work, but we're willing to do something as a partner of this community in the law enforcement capacity.
Our conversation with Richmond County Sheriff Richard Roundtree continues in just a moment. We want to talk about the staffing situation at the Sheriff's Office, what he's doing to hire and retain deputies, when the Means Report continues. Welcome back. We're talking to Richmond County Sheriff Richard Roundtree about what is going on in the city of Augusta and how the Sheriff's Office helps keep us all safe. Real quick, Sheriff, before we move to other topics, you were talking about the nuisance ordinance in our last segment and dealing with homelessness. Is panhandling part of all that? And real quick, what is panhandling? Is it when I'm filling up my car and someone says, may I have $1? Or is it my car broke down, I need some gas or food, or is it all of that?
Well, in essence, the essence of our law is the aggressive panhandling. Okay. If somebody's going into a store and a person say, can you spare some change? And you move on and no interaction, then no. We talk about aggressive when that person follows you to your car, gets aggressively angry about threatening you about if you don't give me money. Those are the ones we're talking about. The individuals who just ask and you move on and say nothing else in interaction. That's not what we're using with aggressive panhandling. Like I said, again, we're talking about the ones who actually following individuals and making threatening gestures toward the person if they don't give them any money. So, that's what we're really trying to target. That is part of, one of our ordinances. But again, with this new program that we're starting, our goal is we're just not trying to find people to lock up.
Right. Want to help them.
We do want to help them. And that's where the courts come in, that they have offered to add those services to help those individuals. And again, by business owners, if you don't want those individuals on your property and you have told them and warned them, then we can be that extra arm for you when it comes to the fact if you're not present or after hours or late at night, that to say, you're not allowed on this property at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So that's where that collaboration comes in at.
Sheriff, let me ask you about your staffing situation. Is there a shortage of deputies? How big of a shortage is there? And are you dealing with it and making progress? Yeah,
absolutely. We, just like many other sheriff's offices in the state of Georgia, when I go to my sheriff conferences, almost every sheriff office in the state of Georgia are suffering from staffing shortages. Mm-hmm. You've seen in the last 3 years, I think, it's been a 50% increase in retirements and in law enforcement. And that is, partially because of the climate now. And we've had individuals to leave, especially in a lot of some of the social injustices that have happened over the past few years, where individuals have come to us and said, look, I love my job, but my family really wants me to leave and wants me to do something else. And, and I can understand that. So, this is something that we've seen is happening throughout the state of Georgia with the shortages. So we are short, but we're not to the point Because we're so large and because we consolidated, we can shuffle around people, we can fill in different spots and whatnot.
So there aren't parts of town that are
Oh,
unprotected?
no, absolutely. We're never to the point where we are critically to the point where we can't respond to calls.
Yeah.
We're always going to be able to answer calls and if we bring in people for overtime or whatnot. But again, it just puts so much strain on the deputies who are answering the calls. And it's to the point where, let's say on average night, if you're fully staffed, you may answer 3 calls per shift, and then the rest you can do proactive policing. But because of staffing shortages, that call volume may go up to 7 calls a night or 10 calls a night instead of the 3, for reports and things of that nature. And what it does is it gives us less time to do proactive patrol. So we're still answering calls. We want to be able to have that time and the extra manpower that we can go out and do proactive patrols and actually look for hot spots and dangerous individuals within the city.
What should we expect when we call the sheriff's office when it comes to response time? Sometimes people like to complain that the officer didn't get there quickly enough. I'm guessing it's probably like an emergency room where you triage people from most pressing to less pressing. What should we expect when we hang up the phone and wait for the silver and black to pull up?
Yeah, and that's one of the misconceptions that people don't understand here in Richmond County, because it's different in other parts of the county where our 911 center does not fall under the sheriff's office. It used to prior to consolidation, but after consolidation, it doesn't fall. So our deputies respond to the calls when they're dispatched. So when you're saying that triage, the dispatcher, when they get that call, they prioritize that call based on the severity of the call and what deputies and to be sent out at what time. So if you get in, your car was broken into, and you call, and then somebody's house is getting broken into or shooting has happened, it may be 20 minutes before the dispatch even dispatch your call for your car break-in before the deputy gets it. So it ain't like the deputies took that long to get it.
Right.
The call is being prioritized to say, okay, Brad's car's got broken into. He's standing by it. It's going to be there when the deputy gets there. But these are calls with crimes against person, and they take priority of it. And that's why sometimes people don't realize the fact that, we respond when the call is given out. But like I say, that cooperation we have with our dispatchers is they, like you say, a good analogy is they triage the calls based on their training and their, they have national standards too about what a priority 1, priority 2, priority 3 calls. So, we're not ignoring anyone.
Right.
But, I think you would agree, and I think everyone else would agree, that if someone is being assaulted and someone's lawnmower got stolen, that I think we need to go to the assault call first.
I agree. You need to just be patient. What's it like? And this is another thing we could probably talk for 30 minutes about, but what's it like for a deputy out there on road patrol when they respond to any kind of call? What's their mindset? We see your vehicles out there. The windows may sometimes be tinted. What's it like for those men and women on a daily basis to do their job?
Well, like I say in Richmond County, because it's like no other agency around here. They just never know what to expect. Yeah. When that call goes out, they never know what to expect. Another segue I would tell you, when people say, well, people just pull me over. When a deputy pulls your car over, he has no idea what's in that car, how many people are in that car, what that person has just done, what their mindset is, what they're capable of. That is an uncertain feeling. And unfortunately, this is a dangerous line of work, as you can see with Deputy Mercer. And since I've been sheriff, for different circumstances, we've had 4 line of duty deaths, since I've been sheriff. So the reality of, not being to come home at the end of that shift is very real. So that anxiety is always there for these deputies. And that's why, we should treat them as heroes, because again, every time they go to a call, every time they stop a car, a domestic call or any call they go to, a burglary call or anything, they have no idea what they're going to expect. And they have to rely on their training and their fellow deputies to make sure they get home safe. So that anxiety is high. And then again, let's think about the flip side of it. Think about their family at home. Like when Deputy Mercer was injured, all social media knew was a deputy in Richmond County had been shot. Think about the 700 plus family members who didn't know when their people was working. Could have been my relative, could have been my father, could have been, So, that anxiety goes all the way throughout the family. And that's why this is such a tough profession to recruit and retain people in, because of those uncertainties of every day.
And I'm so sorry about the 4 officers that you've lost. It's 4 too many. It's such a dangerous job. Sheriff Roundtree, I remember when you were working homicide, you were great on the streets. You know, I think about the HBO show The Wire. You were good police. You solved crimes. You stopped a serial killer in his tracks, Ronaldo Rivera.
Yeah.
Do you miss that? Is the office life, and I know it's not all office life, you're out there, do you miss the streets?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes, you know, when we get the call, I do. I don't miss being on call 24 hours a day.
I bet.
Even though I'm on call to be able to, you know, if something critical happens, but, you know, being able to have to get out of your bed at 3 o'clock in the morning, 24 hours a day. I do not miss that part of it. But I do miss interacting with the public. You know, in the office part, I don't get to see the people as much. And, you know, and when I did work homicide, and I tell people, I said, the thing that gave me the greatest success was because people would call in. People believed in calling in tips, and they wanted to participate. They wanted to get involved. So my success was when I went out to a homicide or did a news interview and gave a description, if people knew something, they would call. And I would just react on those calls and put the pieces together. But the individuals would call, and unfortunately, you know, it kind of tapered off with the society, especially some of the gang activity, where they started to intimidate people about these neighborhoods, about just keeping their mouth shut until it happens to them, and then, you know, then they're upset about it. So I wish we can really get back into those days. You know, you're talking 15, 16 years ago.
Sure.
Where the public will really get involved and take back their neighborhoods and tell them that's the way you stop a bully. You stand up to them. And if they give us these tips and on these crimes that we go out, because one thing, we are very good at solving crimes. If you give us information in Richmond County, that's one thing, we are very good. Like I tell the people doing my interviews, I say, we catch killers and child molesters for a living. That's what we do. We take pride in getting violent criminals off the street. But like I say, if the public, let's stand up to the bullies together, I think we can really start to reduce some of this violence in Richmond County.
Well, what a solid message to close this conversation on, Sheriff Roundtree. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for the men and women at the Richmond County Sheriff's Office. We appreciate you.
And that's who deserves all the thanks. Everybody say how much a good job that we're doing. Have a great team, and they need to know it every day.
Well, we appreciate them so much. Richmond County Sheriff Richard Roundtree, be safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
When we come back, how you can shape future editions of the Means Report. It is easy. We will show you in just a minute.